Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us for our monthly Thinking Differently series. It is the top of the hour, and we're going to give folks just a few minutes to come in out of our waiting room, and then we'll get started in just another minute or so. Thanks for being with us. All right, let's go ahead and get started with our February Thinking Differently series. Good morning to all of you. I'm Dr. Cheryl Richards, have the privilege of serving as the president and CEO of Catapult, your employers association. And those of you who are members know that our mission at Catapult is to provide employers with the confidence to navigate everyday operational challenges so that we can make your workplaces more effective and your employees more successful. And one of the ways that we do this every day is by thinking about topics that might be of interest to our member organizations and employers across the state of North Carolina. We know one of the biggest challenges that employers are facing today is simply recruitment and talent acquisition. We've heard through several of our conferences over the last few months that there's a demographic shift that has happened over the last 2 decades or so, leaving us with fewer employees available at the ready. We also know that there's a skills gap that exists. There are people who have left the workforce either voluntarily or have transitioned out through the retirement in the greatest generation of baby boomers. They're now aging out of the workforce. And that leaves us in a little bit of a conundrum as we think about recruiting and trying to bring people into our organizations. So I'm excited today as we talk about our topic on talent acquisition and facing some of the toughest challenges in recruiting to have 2 guests with us today. First, let me introduce Michael Eubank. Michael is a senior partner sales manager at JazzHR. He is, excuse me here, let me get there. He is a small business expert with about 20 years of experience helping to grow companies and optimize their marketing, security, and recruiting processes. Outside of the office, Michael is passionate about animal welfare causes, spending time outdoors, especially skiing and mountain sports. Michael, thank you so much for being with us this morning.
Well, thank you for having me, Cheryl.
And our second guest is our own Catapult, Shannon Leonida. Shannon is our recruiting team lead at Catapult. She holds a bachelor's degree from Indiana University of Pennsylvania and a master's degree from the University of North Carolina at Greensboro. Early in her career, she spent time in public education before transitioning into professional development and corporate training. When in-person trainings came to a halt in 2020, the opportunity presented itself to make a career shift into human resources and recruiting. This has always been a strong interest of Shannon's. Today, she is our recruiting team lead at Catapult, and this allows her to blend her leadership and interpersonal skills while she provides excellent service to our members and helps in placing highly qualified job seekers into satisfying roles in our community. So Shannon, we're delighted to have you join us in this conversation as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Cheryl.
All right, so for our format on today's presentation, we're going to do something a little bit different. We're going to ask Michael to walk through a bit of a presentation for us on how he and the team at JazzHR thinks about tackling our recruiting challenges. And then we're going to open the floor to Shannon and ask Shannon to reflect on some of the information that she's heard and put on a cap of representing the members that Catapult serves. And then we'll have a dialogue between Shannon and Michael at the end facilitated. As always, if you have questions, please feel free to put those in the chat. I'll be monitoring the chat throughout this presentation. And then at the appropriate time, I will pose your questions to Michael or Shannon. So with that, Michael, I'm going to turn it over to you and let you kick us off.
Fantastic. Well, thank you for the introduction, Cheryl, and really appreciate the opportunity to connect with all of you this morning. Once again, my name is Michael Eubank. I'm a Senior Partner Sales Manager at JazzHR. And today we're going to talk about some of the biggest recruiting challenges that exist in today's employment market. So next slide, please. So what we're going to be covering today is we'll be diving into some of the recruiting challenges that HR decision makers are facing in 2023. One of the ways that we'll be unpacking that is by looking at recruiting stress in the labor market. We'll also be covering some strategies to respond to those challenges and stressors and diving into a few specific areas that you can focus on in your business in the new year. Next, please. To kick things off, let's go over the top recruiting challenges that HR decision makers are facing in 2023. So employers are facing significant challenges. What's up on the screen is a few key data points from employees' quarterly insight report. The big ones that jump out to me are probably ones that are surfacing in your businesses as well. There's insufficient number of candidates that are out there in the market, so just not enough talent to fill positions. And then even with that smaller pool, there's increased competition from other employers. Those are things that I hear each and every day. Some new ones that have surfaced a little bit more are competition from a salary perspective and the pressures that employees desire to sort of work in a remote or hybrid scenario can bring. And then interesting enough, another challenge that have surfaced is dealing with too many candidates, which is sort of on the bottom of the screen. So as folks begin to expand their sourcing, they're finding they have a really large pool of candidates to work through. And then communication with that larger pool of candidates can really present a challenge as well. Next slide, please. So let's break down some of the stressors in today's labor market. The majority of recruiters, and I think this is a great data point, feel that recruiting is more stressful today than it was just 1 year ago. So let's explore why folks feel that way. Recruiting is perceived as more challenging primarily because of a combination of a lack of candidates and increased competition. So some of those data points that we looked at the previous slide. What we're also seeing is that employers are leaving organizations at a higher rate, creating more open roles to fill. So there's increased desire to fill roles, a smaller pool of candidates, and more competition over that smaller pool. Next slide, please. So how can you respond to these challenges and stressors? A huge first step is to improve the recruiting experience. And a big thing that I always like to emphasize here is it's not just improving the recruiting experience for candidates, but also your internal organization. So it's critical to involve your team, but involve them in a smart way. Another really important element is to improve communication, collaboration, and stakeholder input. We can't involve a process, improve a process, unless we're all involved in it and are communicating that information in a clear way. I always think it's critical as well to focus on long-term goals. And I know that's challenging, but it's about finding someone who's not just a fit for now, but really viewing your new hires with an eye towards the future. I always believe it's important to hire for cultural fit as well. So one of the lenses to look at that through would be, what is it really like to work at your organization? And a great way to sort of roll that into your recruiting process is to involve the people that they're working with. right? So, in order to make sure they're a fit, let's connect them with the folks that they're going to be working with, make sure that they're aligned with their goals and have that initial cultural connection. And one of the big things I believe in today's competitive recruiting market is making sure that we stay in touch with candidates. We need to over communicate. So make sure that the process that we're moving a candidate through is clear. Explain that up front. When you conclude an initial conversation with a candidate, be sure to lay out the next step for them very, very clearly. Next, please. There are a range of different opportunities to optimize. And to me, this is generally a result of good data, right? So we need to be able to understand the key metrics associated with our recruiting process in order to evolve it over time. Big ones to be able to identify right from the start are things like time to hire and source reporting. Where are we finding candidates? Where are we seeing volume of candidates versus, where are we ultimately hiring people? Also, finding the right new hire is a team effort. Feedback means informed decisions. And a great way to standardize feedback would be things like pre-configured interview questions or discussion topics. I also love rankings and scorecards, little things that we can do to increase visibility into the feedback that we're gathering from our employees, as well as the candidates that we're interviewing throughout the process. Next slide, please. Uh, I also believe in leveraging recruiting technology because it can have a major impact on your organization. So thinking back on some of those data points that we looked at the previous slide, so things like time to hire. Recruiting technology can improve time to hire by 27%. But first we need to know, what our time to hire is in order to impact it. Technology can also reduce acquisition costs by 30%. It can increase the effectiveness of employee referrals by increasing that by upwards of 20%. It comes back to data. If you have a feel for time for hire, your acquisition costs, the impact of current employees, that's a great start. But we really need to begin to understand those data points if we want to impact our hiring process. In addition to that, recruiting technology can also help us cast a wider net of candidates and help us identify the right folks so we can reach out to them quickly, and also organize and automate, reduce repetitive tasks, allowing us to do more with less. And also it's going to allow us to capture clear feedback grounded in the key criteria for the role. Next slide, please. Now we're going to be covering some of the strategies that you can use to respond to the challenges and stressors. And let's dig into a few specific areas of your hiring process that you can focus on in the coming months. A big part of this is examining your investments in recruiting technology. Recruiters and teams can't manage a complex employment market without the right tools to impact it. But really it's about a mix of technology, personal connection, and services to save time and empower teams to focus on the human aspects of recruiting. So it's a little bit counterintuitive, but technology will allow us to deliver a more personal experience to our internal recruiting team, as well as the candidates that we're moving through our process. And in a way, it does that by freeing up bandwidth to make sure that our recruiting process is more modern and scalable for all that are involved. Next, please. A simple step that you can take is to examine your advertising presence. And this doesn't necessarily mean having to spend more money. So certainly increasing an advertising budget is something that a lot of organizations are doing, but there's lots of little things that you can do to expand the number of candidates that are interested in your roles. A huge one that I truly believe in is creating a productive and actionable candidate database. Every candidate that applies to our jobs has value, and what we need to do is categorize them so we understand who has the desired skills and experience for the role, who's engaged with us previously, so that the next time we're looking to fill a similar role, we can not only go out and find more people, but we can also really easily surface and reach back out to the folks that we liked last time around. I'm a huge believer in employee referrals as well. So if you have a team member or a group of team members that have been great contributors to your organization, it's critical that we reach out to them, see if they know someone locally who they'd want to recommend for the role. It's an extremely underutilized sourcing strategy and one that can have a tremendous impact on your business. Another simple strategy is making sure that our roles are also posted on social media. It's a step that a surprising number of small businesses skip, and it's a relatively simple one. We want to make sure on our LinkedIn, on our Facebook, everywhere where someone would be interacting with our business, learning about it, we want to make them aware of why our organization's a great place to work and how they can engage with us if they're interested. And then also, I am a believer in passive sourcing as well. So where appropriate, go out and try to hunt some folks that have the skills and experience for your role. And in addition to that, track how your engagement with those folks. So if you're, reaching out to someone who, didn't directly express interest in your role, but you connect with them, and there's some interest, but the timing isn't right at the moment, we just want to make sure we note that person has what we need, that they're interested, and so we can re-engage with them at a future date. Next slide, please. Another area many small businesses are focusing on is adding new recruiting roles. So it's really about having the right people focused on meeting the demands of an extremely competitive employment market. And while we're introducing more specialization, more recruiting experience, what it also allows for is for our hiring managers, the folks that are ultimately going to be working with these employees, it frees up their bandwidth to participate in the recruiting process at the appropriate stage in a thoughtful manner. Next slide, please. I really believe in improving our employer branding as well. So we all know that your product or service is great, but how do you differentiate yourself as an employer? For example, what's your reputation among your internal team? Are you a great place to work? Would your employees recommend working at your business to other folks? And what steps can we take to communicate that the value and experience that you deliver as an employee to folks externally? So for example, something simple is just like the careers page on your website. Evaluate your online presence. Is it clear on our website, what it's like to work at our organization, how I can engage if I'm interested? And then I also believe in, what I refer to as a culture of communication. Moving candidates through a process is like any other, sales or marketing process that we're moving someone through. We want to explain to candidates how they take the first step, what the process looks like after that first step, and each step along the way when we engage with them, we want to clearly communicate what that next step is and what the timing of that step will be. It's critical to be transparent. If someone doesn't know where they're in their process or your expectations for them, that's where it's really easy for them to sort of slip off the tracks and engage with someone who's moving them forward in a little bit more thoughtful way. Next step, please. Next slide, please. Enhancing your diversity, equity, and inclusion programs are a key step as well. And it's one that most HR decision makers are planning to invest more in 2023. This includes simple sourcing strategies. And an amazing data point would be on social media. So LinkedIn posts that are related to diversity receive 91% more engagement than posts on other topics. I always believe in engaging on the local level as well. Take the time to engage with local student or professional organizations to learn about their organizations and involve them in your message. And then take some simple steps, right? So update your messaging with inclusive language. That could be something as simple as the job descriptions that are many candidates' first impression of your organization, or rolling that inclusive language into the careers section of your website to give candidates for a feel for their experience as an employee. Next slide, please. The last thing that we're going to focus on is scalability. As you begin to evolve your hiring programs, it's key to keep scalability in the forefront of your strategy. And for me, as I seek to involve scalability into the processes I impact, I really like to begin with evaluate, right? So let's look at our process and understand that the data points that make it up, because this will allow us to find areas for improvement. And then don't be afraid to adjust. So once we find an area to improve, let's take an action to approve it and measure the impact of that change. Next slide, please. I like to ask myself these questions, and it partially ties back to my comments on data. Where do I have data regarding my recruiting process, and where do I not? This should allow me to identify some must-haves. So where can, what do I absolutely need to address within my process? Also, where can we find the right people, right? So where are we seeing a volume of interest in our role? But ultimately, where are we hiring the folks that are performing well? And then also I like to look at, how can we do more with less or the same with less? It all relates back to becoming more efficient within our processes and in terms of how we improve the outcomes of our recruiting. Next slide, please. I wanted to wrap up with by quickly touching on JazzHR and what we do. So JazzHR is a applicant tracking system, which is just a needlessly complicated way to say recruiting software. The most basic thing that we're going to do is you'll create a job once within our system. We're going to take that job and send it to all the major sources of candidates. So the major job boards, Indeed, LinkedIn, ZipRecruiter, Glassdoor, Google, your website, your social media. There's simple tools to encourage employee referrals. But everyone who applies through that process will flow into a single bucket within that account. From there, we have tools to filter those people so we can focus on the candidates with the desired skills and experience, prioritize them in terms of our outreach. And then we have workflows and automation. So as we try to do more with less, we can organize our process and move candidates through in an efficient way, but also by understanding who's where in the process and what needs to happen, improve that communication internally, but also with our candidate pool. Next slide, please. So on the screen's my contact information. Please feel free to reach out if you'd like to discuss your unique situation, the recruiting challenges specific to your business. Would love to have an opportunity to chat about how we can help.
Michael, thank you so much. Some great insights in here, and I've taken some copious notes to start our Q&A, but I'd like to give Shannon an opportunity to just kind of provide a reflection and response to some of the things you heard and how that might resonate with some of our Catapult members.
Yes, thank you, Michael. Thank you, Cheryl. As I listened, I was thinking the same thing, Cheryl. I had a lot of things that I was scribbling down, but it's just ironic that these are all the pain points, all the same things that I hear and our team hears from our members every day as they go through the recruiting process. I think part of what is fantastic about what Catapult can offer our members as far as a partner in recruiting is helping them see that everyone's facing these challenges. You know, we work on projects every day, and time is money, and I think those two words are the key to helping people understand how to best navigate time and money. As far as Catapult goes, we're not your typical recruiting staffing agency, and so it's definitely our desire as we move through projects to save you as much money and as much time as we possibly can, because we are in the interest of improving what our local businesses offer to the community. And so just a few things about Michael's comments. As far as collaboration, we work with a lot of member companies that don't have a full-on recruiting department per se, and so there are needs that our members have that might come and go. And so as far as what Michael was saying about increasing recruiting budgets, some organizations don't have that in their budget. And so what is really great about what we can offer is that we can be a partner to you as needed. So if there comes a time when you are adding 5 employees to your organization, we can be there, but then the next month you might not be in that situation. And so helping your leadership at your organization understand what your priorities are. So I think setting priorities and all that. And as far as when we actually get into a recruiting job, I think that's another pain point that our members are dealing with, is they don't fully understand why we're dealing with these challenges. And so one of the things that we as a recruiting team are always assisting members in doing is setting priorities for your hiring process. Like Michael said, there's just a decreased amount of candidates out there. So what are your priorities for a particular role? It's very challenging because we used to be able to just look at the applicants and take our pick. That's not the case anymore. So yeah, so that's something that we can assist with as well. And as far as the technology, I think Michael, I worked with a member last week that doesn't even have a LinkedIn page yet. And so that's something we can assist you with as well, because that exposure is real. I might be throwing myself under the bus a little bit to talk about how much I use social media, but it's the first thing I do with my coffee in the morning. And I think a lot of people do that. And so exposure is huge. And if nobody knows that you're looking for an HR generalist, you know, there might be people out there that Michael hit that, you know, he alluded to, is that there are passive candidates that might be out there. And so those are a few other thoughts that I had as I was listening. As far as investments, I can't say enough about what Catapult can offer you as far as a real value because we are not that traditional staffing agency. So I feel like we're partners with you. We all have the same goal. We want to save you time. We want to save you money. But if you don't have access to that, to those resources or that technology, that's kind of where we can partner with you. So those are a few of my thoughts. I love what Michael was talking about rankings and scorecards and things like that. Many recruiting departments that we work with don't have any type of a system. So that's something else that, that we can help you wrap your head around. I'm really excited to kind of hear what others' thoughts are as far as what you heard, and if you're feeling the same things that we're hearing from the members that we work with. You know, we feel like we've just hit the tip of the iceberg as far as assisting members in addressing their recruiting pain points. So we're here, and we would love to assist you with what you are dealing with. So Cheryl, other thoughts?
Yeah, it's a great segue, Shannon, I think, to invite our audience to start thinking about your questions and get those in the chat as we start to explore some of these topics in a little bit more depth. Because we do want to know, you know, is this resonating with you? Are these the challenges you're facing? And then more importantly, how can we help and how can we be a resource? One of the reasons we invited Michael is that we partner with JazzHR. And so when you think about the idea of using technology to save you resources as an organization, this is one of the things that we can help connect you with partners who can do exactly that. And then Shannon, you mentioned, you know, I think that episodic, if I can call it an episodic solution to a pain point that's coming in, where corporations don't need to necessarily hire a full-time recruiter if that's not in your budget, but you can look to the resources that are either on staff at Catapult or through our partners to help fill a gap in an episodic kind of need, and then move on and prioritize your other work that we know HR has a lot of. Let me go through, I want to explore a couple areas with both Michael and Shannon a little bit more. And so I want to talk about a couple top areas. One is around the insufficiency of candidates and maybe some of the resources, places that you posted or sourced candidates. Michael, I know on your last slide, you mentioned your ATS system that it can be a culminator of posting on Glassdoor and LinkedIn, Google, ZipRecruiter, et cetera. What are some of the other places or ways that you've found to source candidates, both you and Shannon? I'd love to hear.
Absolutely. So ways that candidates can find qualified candidates quickly. The big thing I believe in is casting that wider net. It's not just job boards, it's not just Indeed. It's about doing all of those little things, right? So just take the time to post on your LinkedIn, on your Facebook page. And then I'm also a huge believer in a candidate database. So a lot of the small businesses out there have discovered the power of marketing to their existing customers. So just like you would keep in touch with a pool of prospective customers, it's important to keep in touch with a pool of prospective candidates. And then the biggest thing that I encourage folks to do is let's make sure that we're able to identify the right folks very, very quickly and then pursue them aggressively. The days of getting an application on Tuesday and following up with that person on Friday are gone. If someone applied to your job, they probably applied to 10 others. So we need to make sure that we reach out to them aggressively. And something that's really worked well for me personally is to leverage self-scheduling in my initial touch to candidates. So when you reach out to folks, instead of saying, hey, can you get back to me with a few times at work, give them a link where they can pick a time on your calendar. That little bit of ease of engagement can help make the initial connection. And it's been very impactful for me personally.
Excellent. Shannon?
I think the other thing I'd like to mention is that almost every organization that we work with has affiliations with societies or personal affiliations. I'm just thinking a lot of organizations are really considering how they can diversify their workforce and things like that. So I've worked with organizations that ask, can you post on historical societies or Association of Black Engineers or organizations such as that. And often our members are also members of additional organizations. And so by asking those questions, we can find out very easily if there are job boards that are available. So that's another resource that the recruiting team at Catapult uses often. And sometimes that doesn't even occur to members that, oh, they have a job board for our specific industry. So that's one thing. I also, while Michael was speaking, I wanted to also kind of piggyback on what he's saying about speed. And I think that's another huge pain point for our member organizations, is that they just don't have the time. They have all these other things that are going on. And Michael's absolutely 100% correct in, if you don't act on the best candidates, you're going to lose them because everybody's hiring for that particular position. And so speed is huge, super important. And, back to my time and money, people always ask as we're entering into a project, how long is this going to take? Because that impacts how much this is going to cost me. I always share that I feel like we get our best candidates within the first week as far as applicants. That doesn't include those candidates that we're actually actively sourcing. But people who are ready to make a move in their career are going to be the first to apply. And so you can't wait 3 weeks to look and see who has been in there. And so if you don't have the resources in your organization to do that, I think that's one of the things Michael was saying, is that we need to figure out how together we can prioritize that. How do we speed things up, or we're going to miss out on the best candidates? Because everybody wants the best candidate in the shortest amount of time. We want them now. And that first touch, that as soon as they apply, we need to figure out how we can reach out to them.
Yeah, I think, go ahead, Michael, please.
I was going to say, and to piggyback on that as well, well, certainly it's important to reach out quickly. I also, really believe in the value of involving the folks that they're working with within the recruiting process, but doing that in a smart way. So that when I engage with a candidate, maybe I have some predefined questions or discussion topics, that are tied to the key criteria for the role. And let's face it, people have different interview styles or frankly, just different levels of experience. So by adding some standardization to that process as well, it's not like someone's going to be pulling out a crumpled resume from a drawer with some notes scribbled on it. We have two different people asking the same questions, and that can really add to the efficiency and feedback of our process as well.
And as good HR professionals, we would recommend that having alignment in rubrics and questions and rating scales is best practice as well. So I'm glad you mentioned that. There's two things that both of you brought up that I want to explore in the few minutes that we have remaining. And one of them relates to a question that came in through our chat as well. So the couple areas that I want to talk about, process and technology. And then I want to move into a little bit more of the branding and the culture after that. But let's start with process and technology. Both of you have talked about streamlining processes. Michael, in your presentation, I think you referenced that using technology can streamline processes up to 20% and reduce acquisition costs and some of the repetitive nature of things. And one of the questions that has come in is for particularly small organizations. Do you have recommended technology software packages or recommendations of platforms that can be used for recruiting by those smaller organizations?
Well, certainly, JazzHR is an applicant tracking system or recruiting software. But in my experience in working with small businesses, is it's the technology is only as good as the relationship that comes with it. So I truly encourage folks to reach out to me. Let's chat about your unique situation. And what we can do is sort of unpack your approach today. Who's involved with it? What's working, what's not, and then opportunities to impact that process with technology. The simple things are casting a wider net and adding some organization, but it's really tailoring that to address your unique needs and the personal touch that some coaching can bring to the relationship that'll help you, execute against those business needs, with technology as a tool to facilitate that.
Great. And Shannon, any resources that you've been made aware of as you're working with member organizations?
Everyone has their own applicant tracking system, but I do think that they all offer some strengths and offer some tools that we can use. Again, anything that's going to save you time and get you in front of those candidates quickly. There's just so many. There's so many different strategies that organizations are using. But I love what Michael said about your technology is only as strong as the relationship that comes alongside it. And I always remind myself that technology isn't going to put me out of a job, because you definitely need a competent person to go along with that technology. And so I would just piggyback and say that partnership is crucial, because sometimes organizations don't even know what they have in front of them. They don't know how to best utilize that. And the more experience that you can add to your team, whether that is bringing additional people onto your organization or partnering with an organization such as JazzHR or Catapult, we're all going to bring that knowledge to the table to allow you to use that technology better. There's just so many strategies that you can get, that you can take upon when you're working with the technology. But if you don't know what's in front of you, that becomes a whole other challenge in itself.
I always say it's great to have another partner looking at the problem in a different way, right? So there, we at Catapult talk often about being a high tech and a high touch organization, right? Leveraging the technology where technology makes sense, but leveraging personal relationships and personalized service where that makes sense. And so I think kind of closing out the topic of technology and process, the summary that I would wrap up based on what both of you said is, right, marry your technology with your processes, make sure that they're complementary and that you're getting the right stakeholders in and the right times in the process, and then leverage some of the resources that are outside of your organization to look at that, whether it's in applicant tracking systems, whether it's simply going through and screening the candidates that you have because you don't have the time to do that. There are lots of resources that can help in both technology and process that can save your company money. So thank you for that. Let's move on to the topic around culture and DE&I. Michael, you talked a lot about, employer branding and what the employer brand looks like, but also aligning prospective employees with the company values. So I'm curious to lean in a little bit more to the culture and being a leading best practice organization. How far forward, can organizations go leading with DE&I and statements around their inclusiveness to reach new candidates? You want to comment a little bit more on that?
Sure. So for me, this really ties back into employer branding. So, if a lot of the small businesses, when I look at their website, the passion for the products that you offer, the services that you offer are clear on the website. And I really like to make sure that, the passion about our employees and why it's a great place to work and the type of culture that, exists in our organization, are really expressed on the website as well. And those topics around diversity, equity, inclusion are something that people are looking for and will engage with, and are a critical component, of that employer branding exercise.
Yeah, and you talked a little bit too about referrals, which I think goes directly into the culture of an organization. I know we at Catapult have said, we our values are innovation, integrity, community, excellence, and service. And so when we think about the employees that work at Catapult and how we might want to bring in new employees that align with our values, that's really important to us. Shannon or Michael, either of you have any experience or stories you might want to share with companies that have done it really well in using either referrals or very forward-thinking, inclusive practices to bring more candidates into their fold?
Again, I think it's really important for an organization before they're even ready to write a job description to understand what their priorities are. And in my initial meetings with organizations who are looking for new candidates, you can tell right away if diversity and inclusion is a priority of theirs, because they're going to tell you. So it's more than talking the talk, it's walking the walk. And so I feel like I have had some really good experiences where it's incredibly evident, whether it's like Michael said, looking at their website and seeing their branding, or talking to their leadership and fully understanding what it is that they're all about and if they mean what they say. So I've had great experiences with that, but sometimes you have to coach people a little bit, as an outside consultant, to help them understand that people are really listening to hear what your organization is all about, and if they really do walk the walk. So that's something that, as we think about our team, we bring people on with our team with personal referrals all the time, because we know what we're looking for and we have value. We know what we value. And so just, sharing that with organizations and helping them fully understand that transparency, how do we do and what do we do and why do we do it? And the why is huge. And your candidates need to know why you do what you do if you want to attract them and retain them.
Sure. And to offer an analogy with marketing practices, if you want to improve your product or service, a massive part of that should be customer feedback. So understanding what do people like about my product, where are there areas for improvement, and the same thing goes with employees. If we want to improve our workplace culture, we really need to be engaging with employees. What do you like? What can we improve? What would you recommend? Would you recommend our organization to someone else? What would the key tenets of our organization be that you highlight? That conversation could not only extend itself to the employer branding, so you can communicate that to prospective employees, but also what it can do is by engaging your employees, listening to their feedback in terms of what's working, what's not, how you can improve it. Then when you reach out and say, hey, do you know anyone who's like you that be interested in working with our organization? By having that engagement and dialogue with HR and the broader organization in place, it's a much simpler step for an employee to say, okay, here's someone who's like me that these things will resonate with.
Yeah, I think you both mentioned great things from an organizational standpoint around culture fit and the values of an organization. There also, I'll throw a shameless plug in here for job fit and the alignment with not only the culture of the organization, but the functions of the job. And one of the things that Catapult uses for all of our new hires is a tool called the Predictive Index, or the PI. And so every new employee that we hire at Catapult takes this very short 2-question survey, and we have that aligned to a job description, and it helps us find the match not only for the culture that we're looking to build at Catapult, but the job function. And that could be another resource for any of our organizations on the line. If you're looking to drill down another layer deeper, Shannon and her team and Kevin, our Director of Pre-Employment Services, could certainly talk to you more about utilizing the PI in your recruiting and retention efforts as well. So thank you for allowing me to do that quick little shameless plug for that resource. We have a question in the chat that kind of relates to this topic, and that is, what other job boards do you suggest besides LinkedIn, Catapult, and JazzHR? She says she has posted and paid for some of these, but still can't attract the best candidates. So any other thoughts from the two of you on other resources and ways to post?
Sure. So the major job boards are going to be LinkedIn, Glassdoor, ZipRecruiter, Google, and Indeed. Those are overwhelmingly where the majority of applicants are going to come from. But there's a range of other different types of job boards that are more niche focused that you can tap as well. So for example, there's job boards that are focused on engineering talent or sales talent or customer service talent. The most important thing that I can encourage folks to do is, when you're making an investment in another source, having the data to track the impact of that investment is critical. Is this driving candidates? That's great. Candidate flow is important, but is it ultimately resulting in folks that we hire? So, sometimes just from, looking at let's say a sponsored post on Indeed, it drove a very high volume of applicants. Maybe we did a niche customer service job board as well. It drove a smaller number of applicants, but which one of those two choices produced more new hires and more new successful new hires are really critical in terms of evaluating the success of that investment.
I would agree, Michael, and that's, again, some of our organizations don't know what technology exists within their applicant tracking system, but that's typically with whatever applicant tracking system you're using, a report you can pull that say, okay, where are we getting most of our our applicants for a specific role? And we've got the ability to show members that. And I'm going to go back to what I said before as well. Professional organizations or societies or things like that also have the ability to allow you to post on their websites, typically for a small fee or no fee at all, depending on what their membership to that organization includes. So I would say the data is really important, because you'll know where you want to focus if you're getting good data from filling your roles. So yeah, find out what your technology offers you. And if you don't know, we're here to help you find out what that technology offers you.
Excellent. Yeah. And back to your comment about using referrals, right? Also looking at your own employees and the societies and organizations that they're involved in can help expand that network. It's they'll tell 10 friends and they'll tell 10 friends and they'll tell 10 friends. And the next thing you know, you've got a robust pool of candidates. As we head into the last few minutes here of our session, I just want to open it up first to Michael, and then Shannon, I'll come to you and just say, are there any other strategies or resources that you think might be advantageous for our listeners to tap into as we bring this session to a close this morning?
Sure. So one of the big things that I've emphasized throughout, is data. And data doesn't need to be as clean as, my acquisition costs are this per employee, although that's a place where you want to get. Just look at your process today, what's working, what's not, and then you can begin to sort of identify what you want to measure so we can approach things in a more thoughtful process, thoughtful way of moving forward. The other really big thing that I'd like to emphasize for folks is, you're not alone. A lot of small businesses out there, it is an incredibly competitive employment market. And probably there's a few heads nodding out there where it's like, wow, like I'm not getting the volume of candidates that I'm looking for, or I did all these things to get more volume, and it's really hard for me to find the right people in that pool. These are things that all small businesses are experiencing. But while there's that commonality among the recruiting challenges for small businesses, there's certainly things that are unique to your organization, and not losing sight of sort of the unique elements, that make who you are, or maybe present unique challenges to you, are important to keep in mind as well.
I would share as well that I think we're all in this together, and we're all feeling restrictions on budgets. And I mean, money is a huge thing right now. I don't know how many of you that are on this webinar are from the Raleigh area, but I was watching the news last night, and on WRAL they did a piece on the problems with filling jobs. And so whether it's a small business or a large business, I think one of the things that we all need to get better at is setting priorities. And so what is our priority? Are we going to invest in full-time recruiting staff? Are we going to identify different partnerships that we can have? What are our priorities as far as hiring? Everyone's feeling it, and everyone's being asked to wear more and more hats. One of the gentlemen they interviewed last night was a small business owner, and he was doing it all, everything. And that's not what he envisioned when he took out his loan and decided he was going to open this, I feel like it was a barbecue restaurant. He's doing it all now, and he's working on limited hours and all of that. And so we're all feeling that pain. And I think one of the things that's important to myself and the team that I work with is making sure that we're setting our priorities to make sure we're improving the community that we live in. And if that means a partnership with one of our organizations so that you can focus on what your priorities are, let us know. We're here to help. We are definitely committed to making sure that everybody gets through this in one piece and feeling better next year. As Michael said, last year people were feeling better than they are right now. So let's turn this around. So just setting priorities, and if there's any way that we at Catapult can assist you in doing that, we are here and ready to work with you.
Excellent. Thank you, Shannon. That's a great segue as I wrap up our event today. We do have a couple of things coming up in the next few months that really are designed to help you navigate the workplace. And so our series for 2023, which is being held in Charlotte and Raleigh, has sessions upcoming on these very topics: recruiting. We have compensation and total rewards next week in the Raleigh area. That's one thing we didn't get a chance to talk about, but salary compression and the need to evaluate your job compensation levels. So we'll talk about that. Optimizing your HR department, I think, is what we really talked about today, is making sure that you are optimized and putting your time and energy on the things that you need, and then using partners like JazzHR and Catapult to help you with the things that you can outsource. And then lastly, our session on learning and development, because we know once you get them in the door, you want to keep them. And so that's important. So we hope you'll join us for our HR leadership series. You can email our events team or check those out online on our website. We'll have another Thinking Differently a month from now, which is around time management. And as always, we will send out a copy of these slides and information on your HRCI credits. Those will come within the next 48 hours. And we'll thank you all for joining us again for some of our upcoming events. Michael, Shannon, appreciate you both. Thanks for being here. Everyone have a great week.
Thanks,
Thank you, Cheryl.
Cheryl.